So, welcome everyone to this evening event in the German Pavilion. Today is Solutions Day, so we want to talk about degrowth perspectives. In the survey, 50% of German people who were asked argued that there is no alternative to talk about limiting our growth in economy. My name is Undine. I'm a youth representative of the Youth Association for Nature Protection in Germany, and I will be moderating this event this evening together with my colleague Niklas.
Yes, hello and good evening everyone. My name is Niklas Wagner. I'm here with the University of Bonn and the Association Klimadelegation. And yes, before we start into the content of this topic and this panel, let's me say some words of thank you to the big organizing team, which is right now not on the panel, but in the background, probably watching right now this panel as well. There has been a big team of I think 15 people who have been working hard to make this panel happen. They have been putting together the content, and I think the 15 people stand for themselves, but I want to call out especially Jannis Niethammer and Nikolai Gerber, who have been really put a lot of work into this. Yes. Thank you for this. So Undine already said that according to a survey, we have half of German population at least thinking that degrowth is one of the ways to go as a solution out of this crisis. So what we thought is right now we're going to ask you as the audience how you feel about degrowth. So we have prepared a little Slido. I hope the technique is working. And you're going to see the Slido code right now. Can we see the Slido, please? And it would be great if we see it, that you take out your phones and go on the webpage slido.com and enter the code, and then we will ask about your association with degrowth. And this is not only for the audience here at the panel, but as well for the audience watching us online. And we're going to see the answers flowing in, but in the meanwhile, I'm going to walk you through our panelists and the program of tonight. So tonight we want to speak about the critiques to growth, but also want to talk about alternatives to our current economic systems. We want to look at solutions together and alternative regulations to implement post-growth in our society and on a political level. So for this, we have prepared, I think, very nice panel for you. So we will hear first some opening statements from three of our panelists, and then we have two blocks of the discussion. The first block of the discussion is about critiques to growth, and the second one is really about the solutions and how we can shape our future together. So, while the answers are flowing in, let me introduce our speakers. We have today, unfortunately, not with us because he is having a COVID infection, Kentaro Yamamoto. He is an organizer with Fridays for Future Japan and a labor organizer. He is passionate about building a movement that stands with workers. Those are marginalized and especially those in the global south. And he will give a short keynote. Then we have Raisa Francha, a youth leader holding a bachelor's degree in social sciences and a master's in administrative sciences with more than 7 years of professional and volunteering experience in the sustainability sector, from gender equality projects to climate and nature. She has as well a very strong interest in culture. Then we have with us Farzana Farouk Yumu, who is a climate activist and organizer with Fridays for Future Bangladesh. She has also worked at United Nations Women, Feminist Action Coalition, and for the climate justice organization 350.org. Then we have here Katrin Henneberger. Katrin is a German politician and an activist. She is member of the German Parliament for the Green Party, where she chairs the Subcommittee for International Climate and Energy Policy. Then we have Yoreshri Roy, who is an Indian economist with a specialization in the fields of environmental economics, energy economics, and climate change mitigation. She is a professor of economics in the Department of Economics in Jadavpur University in Kolkata in India. And then last but not least, we have Timothy Parikh, who is not on the stage but will join us online, who is an ecological economist originally from Versailles in France. He is a researcher at the School of Economics and Management of Lund University in Sweden, holding a PhD in economics from the Centre d'études et de recherche sur le développement. And he wrote his dissertation, The Political Economy of Degrowth, in 2019. Yes, thank you for being here, and I think a round of applause for our panelists tonight. Great. We have seen the impressions of our Slido, I think, already. We are seeing right now Timothy on the screens. Welcome, Timothy. And we are excited to hear your keynote. If you're hearing us and if you want to talk to us, then the floor is yours. Thank you for being here.
I hear you, and yes, I want to talk to you guys. And that's fantastic to be here. I wish I was there physically, but unfortunately, I can only be there online. And so remind me, so I do have 10 minutes, right?
Yes, right. Like 10-minute maximum, 8 minutes would be great.
That's good. I'll aim for 8 then. So fantastic. And okay, let's get to business. I think what I do as an ecological economics and what has been working within the last few years is trying to better understand the relation between economies and ecologies, and especially the role that economic growth plays into this. So I'm going to share my screen and you tell me whether everything is okay. I think you should be able to see these slides, right?
So far, we are not seeing them.
Maybe it will come. They are now. Let me know when you see something.
We are seeing, like the panelists and me, we are seeing some of them, but our audience sees them right now as well. Great.
Right. Fantastic. So welcome to the summary for policymakers of the mitigation working group report of IPCC AR6. And these 3 small paragraphs have created a lot of fuzz around the concept of green growth. So as you know, the summary for policymakers is, politically influenced, let's say it like this. So scientists write the paper, but it is edited, taking into account the comments of parties. And so it tends to be rather softened and diluted compared to the actual report. The problem is that when you read the summary for policymakers, it tells the story basically that degrowth is not necessary, that we don't even need to talk about degrowth. Why? Because economic growth is being greened. I mean, look, at least 18 countries have sustained greenhouse gas emissions reductions for longer than 10 years. And when you look in the second paragraph, they tell us that, these emissions are not only absolute, but they're also at a rate that is sufficient to keep warming to 2 degrees. So that story has taken over the news, always linked up with these graphs you can find on the blog Our World in Data. Blue curve up showing GDP, red curve down showing greenhouse gases. The story here is always the same. And I think the one on the Financial Times says it all. Economics may take us to net zero all on its own. Bottom line, we don't need to do anything. Business as usual is going in the right direction. I think here we are touching a nerve about the disconnection between the world of economics and the economic lenses used by decision makers and the reality of the social ecological world that is definitely not going in the right direction. So I want to unpack a tiny bit of how did we get to that misunderstanding and why it is so important, and especially at COP, that every single time you hear the word decoupling, green growth, and every single time you see a graph like this, you can just show very easily that this is greenwashing. I know that COP7 has been quite has been discussing a bit about just, you know, the importance of drawing a red line, making the difference between what is greenwashing and what is not. And what I'm going to argue now is that the idea of green growth constitute a form of macroeconomic greenwashing. It is extremely dangerous. I mean, look at Paul Krugman tweeting this a couple of months ago, basically arguing that, you know, UK has nothing to worry about, no need to do any climate mitigation because it's already back at the level of carbon footprint per capita it had in the 50s. In the 1850s, that's what Paul Krugman is saying in the rest of his tweet. So imagine, I mean, how ludicrous of an argument to basically say that UK has nothing to worry about right now, because look, there's a graph on the blog that showed somehow magically that UK has managed to get itself out of an unsustainable situation. So that's the kind of ways of thinking that emerge from this decoupling false story. Another way of looking at the story that we don't often talk about and that we should be talking about more, and that's very much concerned to the discussion about loss and damage that I'm sure we'll be discussing, is the historical responsibility of these countries like the UK and France and US that right now appears to have stabilized their emissions and so appear to magically grow out of nowhere. They're not magically growing out of nowhere. They're magically growing out of decades of appropriation and exploitation of resources and mass export of pollutions. These numbers, on the left, you can see the quantified responsibility for climate breakdown. So for all emissions past 350 ppm. Not a big surprise here. You can see that 92% of that excess emissions come from the global north. These are the kind of numbers we should be discussing when we're discussing loss and damage. On the right, you say the same calculation, but not for climate overshoot, but for material footprint, another planetary boundary. And then you see a similar number. The global north is responsible for 74% of cumulative excess material use. So that's a different story. That's what is being said in the IPCC. For the technicalities, I mean, I've written this paper. I'm not going to talk about it. All the details are in there. But let's take France as an example. You see France right now is just supposedly having decoupled. And when you look at its planetary boundaries, it just strikes all red. France is a biophysically obese country with a huge historical responsibility. This is a story. This is a screaming case for degrowth, not a case for, you know, greening growth and not worrying about that. Same thing, you know, when you look at carbon footprint in France, and, you know, it's been reduced by 9% from 1995 to 2021, 9% during that period of time. Anyone daring to call that green growth, you know, shall be forced to read IPCC reports night and days until they understand that reducing emissions from 9% in one of the richest countries in the world from the 90s to today is just cannot be called a climate compatible effective strategy. So that impossibility of decoupling, which I think has been pretty much acknowledged in the IPCC when you read the actual report, is also a nice connection to the concept of degrowth and post-growth that has been mentioned in the adaptation and the mitigation report that is now exploding in the media and that is becoming increasingly popular. Degrowth not only as an acknowledgement that if we cannot green growth, we will have to engage in that big macroeconomic diet in rich countries in order to liberate resources for the global south and to liberate resources not to be used at all, but also as an alternative imaginary to the growth-based economy. So a well-being economy that is focusing on quality, on sharing, on conviviality, instead of just focusing on maximizing productivity, lucrativity, profitability in all these old economic indicators. So this is my last slide because I realized it's already 8 minutes. But my starting point here is that the IPCC report has told us that this green growth that some people have turned into a new story of hopeful development is nothing but a handful of cherry-picked numbers that don't fit together into a coherent strategy to fight not only climate change, but just sustainability as a whole. And so that opens up a huge window of opportunity for what if we cannot just aim ourselves toward this growth-based mode of development. What else is there? The IPCC report has started to talk about sufficiency, and I think that's a nice way of initiating the discussion about like the role of degrowth in rich countries. But there is a whole imaginary to be created around this. It's 9 minutes, so I'm going to just respect what I said and stop here, but I'm sure we'll get back to many of these points during our discussion.
Yeah. So, yeah. Thank you very much for this really nice, thank you very much for this really interesting and I would say also overall input and starting to this topic of degrowth. Now we want to have a second online pre-recorded statement. It is from Kentaro Yamato. As we already mentioned, unfortunately he can't be here today, but he's an activist from Fridays for Future in Japan, and he has a really personal statement, also example, which he wanted to share with us this evening, no matter what, that he can't be here with us today. So I'm sorry for the quality maybe, but I think you will understand his main points. So can we see the video, please?
Hi, I'm Kentaro Yamamoto, organizer with Fridays for Future Japan Climate Justice Project. As Farzana spoke about it a moment ago, we have been fighting a massive coal power project in Bangladesh, financed by Japan. Here, I would like to make the case for degrowth in Asia, based on the experience of our campaign and history of development of Asia. The Matoburi coal-fired power project symbolizes the many destructive projects carried out by Japan across Asia, with $350 million to be provided in the form of loan. It is the biggest development project in the entire history of Japan's foreign aid agency. And the project is being carried out by Sumitomo Corporation, a trading giant based in Japan. And it already caused displacement of more than 20,000 farmers and fisher folks in the village of Matoburi in southeast Bangladesh. Oftentimes, Japan's post-war economic growth is portrayed as a success story both in Japan and abroad, especially in other Asian countries, as the model for non-Western development. So until the recent past, many Asian countries aspired to achieve the economic growth that Japan experienced. However, we need to think about why Japan's post-war economic growth was possible in the first place. Actually, it is a lot to do with imperialism and neocolonialism. Shortly after the end of the Second World War, Japan served as the base for the US military during the Korean War and the Vietnam War. This helped grow industries Japan is now recognized for. As the Japanese economy began expanding again, Japanese corporations, often utilizing the ties with local elites established before the end of the war, started to explore resources in Southeast Asia again. For example, by the 1980s, Japanese corporations depleted much of the rainforest in the Philippines in order to produce lumber. When there weren't enough resources left, they entered Indonesia and Malaysia, and so on. In the name of growth, Japan sank many villages underwater to build dams. In the name of growth, Japan polluted rivers and oceans to operate factories to produce cheap goods. In the name of growth, Japan dispossessed fisher folks to build ports across Asia. In order to obtain land and materials, Japan funded authoritarians like Marcos of the Philippines and Suharto of Indonesia, for example. And imprisonment and killings of land defenders still take place today in those places. And even though the Japanese economy entered a recession decades ago, the economic expansion did not stop. What's left is the Japanese corporations hungry for profit, and they are entering the growing economies like Bangladesh to accumulate more wealth. Like what happened across Asia, the Matoburi coal-fired power project has already displaced so many and may kill many in the future by pollution. But this has been justified like other destructive projects because it is supposed to fuel the growth. We are currently in the crisis in Asia, like many parts of the world. Asia, with the unprecedented economic growth fueled by fossil projects, is already experiencing cyclones, floods, and heat waves every year. Farmers and fisher folks are taking away their livelihoods and lives. In order to stop this crisis, we need degrowth in Asia. We need to radically transform how we organize our economy and go beyond the paradigm of development and growth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kentaro, for this personal but as well very insightful message. Kentaro just said we need degrowth in Asia. Yoyoshri, what do you think? Do you want to give us right now your keynote, maybe as well coming already back to this question? And yeah, Yoyoshri is as well, and this is maybe to be mentioned because Timothy just mentioned, well, the best thing you can do is to read the IPCC report day and night. The better thing what you can even do is probably to contribute to the IPCC, as Yoyoshri did. She did this for the fourth, the fifth, and the sixth assessment cycle. And right now, yeah, we're very excited to hear your keynote as well. Thank you.
Given the discussion, the way it started, I'll start from a very different note that in this year's IPCC report, actually in the Working Group 3, which is on mitigation, it has been said that 25% of the world's population do not have access to basic decent living standards. So there is going to be increase in demand for resources and energy to meet at least the basic decent living standards for these people. But it also shows that can be handled if we consider the status consumption in different parts of the world. And by the status consumption in IPCC report, we tried to show that the consumption which does not, which is not well-being enhancing, but which might be just needed for social prestige. Just to give an example, suppose driving a big car in a congested city road, and so that is not leading to well-being of the person who is getting stuck in the road, but also for others. So from that point of view, IPCC report is very clear that there will be some increase in a provision of services for people who are below the decent living standards. But also there is important to understand that 1% of the people, that has also been mentioned in chapter 5, which I was co-leading, where we showed that it's the 1% of the global population whose consumption is contributing 15% of emission, and 90% of the population, bottom 90% of population is adding only 48% of emissions. So there is need for addressing these inequity in consumption as well. But it also needs to be understood that IPCC report was very clear this year that more urgent action on mitigation is needed because we are not on track in any way for achieving the 2030 goals or 2050 goals of emission reduction. Just to give a few numbers, in the recent UNEP GAP report of 2022, on which also I contributed, where we showed that if we look at 2030 goals. Goals means what is needed to stabilize the temperature level at 1.5 degree, or even if you think in terms of 2 degrees, the need for emission reduction by 2030 compared to 2019 is 30 to 45%. Reduction is needed. But if you look into how much the countries globally have pledged for their emission reduction, looking into the nationally determined contribution, it says that the updated NDCs, because there has been some updation also over this time, updated NDCs commits 1% over what their commitments were. So if we look into the global commitments of NDCs, then they are committing initially, the conditional NDC is 10%, unconditional NDC is 5%, so 15%, and if you add the additional commitment, then it is 16%, but we need 30 to 40%, right? So this gap is still there to stabilize. So which simply means that in IPCC report it has been shown that there is more mitigation which is needed, and more reduction is needed, and commitment needed by everybody. But what I want to say is that if we look into the IPCC report of 6th assessment cycle, we will see that previous to the 6th assessment cycle, always we had been looking into what are the supply side solutions. How do you make your electricity production decarbonized? And so it was more supply side oriented. And but this IPCC report included a societal aspect and the demand side solutions into the mitigation action, where what we tried to show is that if we are looking into people's perspective, then what people need is not just the products, but they need the services. And if we look at the services and how they are delivered in different parts of the world, all different services, say mobility services to access your job, to mobility services to access your education, or nutritional services, look at all the services, then we find that the service delivery is extremely inefficient. No business model has so far looked into the service delivery, end-use service delivery systems, whether they can be improved or not. What we have looked into so far, looking into the supply side, is that how products can be made better, like what Timothy was saying, that how you reduce the energy intensity, or how you relatively decouple your production processes. But if you look at the service, then you see that, say for example, irrigation service is provided with such inefficiency that you use huge primary energy, and at the end user level you get very little useful energy. So there is huge possibility of doing new business models, new technology innovation, and that can lead to better service delivery. And we have shown that in the demand side, if we work through all these possibilities, whether dietary shift, whether mobility by active transportation, and also public transit systems, so you change the modes of service delivery, but provide the services that people need, then we can see that actually you can achieve multiple human well-being goals, and that also helps the climate mitigation, and that is around 40 to 70% mitigation. Emission reduction is possible by, if we look into the 2050, what the emission level reduction is needed. So basically we are saying that, and service delivery system, if you improve, then 45% upstream resource and material use can be reduced. So if we look into, just keep a note on my time, right?
Yes,
so
yes,
just
yes.
stop me whenever I need to. Just tell
I
me
think
1
like,
minute.
2 minutes or so.
Okay, that's fine. So basically we are saying that how you really look at this more providing service differently with business models. We also said that if we look into the structurally, what is the in 10 new insights of future art, which we published very recently, where we tried to show that what is the structural barrier in all the economies. Structural barrier is that we are counting the GDP in such a way so that we are saying that that is the progress indicator. But we are forgetting that for a very long time, the scientists, social scientists are saying that GDP is an incomplete indicator, as it has been said, that it does not really account for, if you are polluting, then that is not accounted for in your, if you are falling sick, it is better for GDP because you show your higher growth because you are selling more medicines. And so, but you are not saying that, you are not showing how many sick days you are spending. So basically there are several indicators which needs to be considered for understanding how people's well-being can be managed better. But also there is a whole bunch of literature which talks about just consumption, which means that how you take the responsibility of the whole supply chain as a consumer, because now it's so horizontally distributed across different countries, your consumption. So how you take care of the downstream supply chain. So
I'm sorry,
we need to think into multiple directions how just consumption can be managed, how bottom 20% can be given decent living standards, how we can manage better the status consumption. And some of these you can look into the IPCC report of this year, chapter 5, and not because I wrote it, but not because my team wrote it, but because it really tells something new and it shows hope that there is a heart. We should not lose heart.
So thank you very much for this keynote and introduction. Yeah, warm applause for you on this side. I think it was a very interesting insight for all of us from your, as you already mentioned, also contributed to the IPCC report. But now we want to move on to our more interactive discussion on the panel, because we have some really interesting panelists here as well. So I want to give the space to you, Reza, because we were talking about, right now we're here on the climate conference and everybody is talking about 1.5 degrees and how it's getting more complicated to make this goal possible. And I want to hear about your perspective. Do you think if we keep on going on a path as how we are right now, and also with our current system, do you think it's possible to stay on this path, or if not, what are the barriers with which we are facing?
Thank you so much. Hi everyone, I hope you are doing well. I see friendly faces. I hope you are digesting all this huge amount of information that you just got. Are you awake? Are you happy? I hope you are energized. It's almost the end, we can do it. So yes, when we talk about 1.5 degrees, I think it's very important that we understand that this is not about emissions only, that we are talking about a world with equality, that we are talking about a world where everyone can thrive and live and not only survive. And with this, I want to say that the current economic system is absolutely awful, inefficient, it's terrible, and it's failing in every sense that we can think of. And if you want to reflect about it, I just invite you to look up to the skies, to the amount of private jets that are flying over our heads while we discuss emissions and climate change in this climate conference. I would also invite you to check your blood for the microplastics and to understand that if we have microplastics now through our veins, it's because there were decisions that were taken to prioritize profit, therefore growth. I would also invite you to think about the prices of the food that we pay here in this venue. $20 for a buffet while people are hungry in the same country that we are having this conference. And all of this is a consequence of economic decisions and an economic system that is oriented towards growth. And I would also like to highlight, I feel that previous speakers, they highlighted very well this imbalance between global north and global south in our economic system. And I think it's very important to understand that this is a continuation of a colonial project. So growth is a colonial project, and for us to tackle growth, we need to talk about colonialism. Growth, our economic system started to accumulate all this wealth because Europeans decided to go to the Southern America and extract wood and enslave people, and this has cost tremendously on the bodies of people, on culture, on communities, and now also it costs our atmosphere that we are talking about today. So, saying short, it's not possible to have 1.5 degrees without considering growth and without considering that we need to stop this colonial project that is still going on today, even by actors like Germany, and even by actors like the European Union right next to us. So yeah, that's my answer in short.
Thank you very much. And good point. Speaking of Germany, so I want to give the word directly to Katrin because it was actually my next question, focusing as we're here in the German Pavilion. Maybe you can give us a short insight about like what are the current discussions, maybe from your daily work in the political Berlin policy making, and maybe what are the challenges you may see if we were talking about degrowth perspectives there.
Yes, thank you so much. So there are two reasons why degrowth isn't in a huge debate in Germany right now and why politicians are not talking about that very often. The first one is, of course, a lack of knowledge, a lack of vision, what degrowth means, and why we need degrowth as a future. And the second reason is because some politicians are also fearing that in the moment they are mentioned the word degrowth, that there will be a shitstorm, especially from the far-right media. So some weeks ago I just had a really sweet tweet about degrowth, nothing special, and all of a sudden it blows up. And then the Bild, it's like a far-right media in Germany, they picked it up and they made a huge story about it and all the thing. So, normal politicians, they are afraid of having this kind of shitstorm from the media, especially from the far-right media. For me, because I'm also a climate justice activist, I really don't care. But well, this is the second reason that some politicians think if they speak about degrowth, it means they also demand less welfare. But the opposite is truly the opposite is truly what degrowth means. So, and for me, degrowth means like a sustainable society, and with that also more democracy. So a democratic decision of how we want to produce, how much energy we want to consume, and also how we want to share the resources we have. For example, do we want to dig up more coal in Germany? Do we want to destroy villages for this coal? Or do we want to phase out sooner? So right now we had something like a standoff with one of our huge coal companies, RWE, who wants still to destroy a village called Lützerath at the coal mine Garzweiler. And if we would have a more democratic system, then of course we would save Lützerath. But also the power of this company, RWE, is so huge. I can feel the influence of the fossil lobby every day in the parliament. So there is also the democratic discourse about the topic of degrowth. And so, also, as you mentioned, colonialism, it's also the question about, do we want maybe more energy efficiency in Germany, or do we want to pursue our way of import more fossil fuels? For example, right now the discussion about more gas from Senegal, what truly is colonial behavior. And so we need in Germany a discussion about degrowth. And for me, degrowth means that there is a fair reduction of production and consumption that ensures both human well-being and ecological sustainable. Sorry for that.
So yeah, thank you very much for this insight from the German perspective. Speaking about different perspectives, Fasana, I want to give the word to you because you're a youth activist, and maybe you can give us an insight about what do you think has to be done. Like maybe what is your criticism about degrowth from an activist perspective, especially because you're like really the new generation and have to live on this planet for a really long time.
Okay, so when I first learned about this panel, Kentaro actually texted me that, Farzana, there is a panel happening on degrowth. And my first reaction is, but we are in a stage of growth in my country, and how can we discuss degrowth? So there is a big difference between do we want to grow, do we want to grow again, or how do we want to grow, and what does this growing means? And everywhere this is so different that people from global north can think about a system and a problem and other things, but in my country people are thinking, is I'm getting washed away in the next flood. The flood, because we are talking about 1.5, we are talking about adaptation, we are talking about global shield, terms which those people doesn't even understand. So there is, first of all, a big and huge gap between how local communities are living and how in this panels like this we are discussing terms which is not even understandable for those local communities. And as an activist who actually work with local communities, have been seen and actually asked and went to these local communities, what we are looking for is basic human rights. And these basic human rights can be discussed if we discuss, as already mentioned, colonialism, capitalism, and all these fancy terms we don't even understand. And all these need to be started from those people who already historically have been growing with our resources and exploiting those of us who are in marginalized communities. And as Kentaro already mentioned about the power plant, a power plant is happening in Bangladesh for growth of our people, and it will develop our region, but the profit is going to Japan. So when the growth or like degrowth, whatever we say, is happening in my land, and they're trying to show it that we are trying to grow you, but the profit is going to some other people and growing their economy, growing their profit, growing their bank balances. So when we're talking about all those fancy words, all those jargon terms, we also need to think about all those community people. If we can't grow their basic lifestyle, it can't be growth for any of us. And there is a panel, and there is a pavilion somewhere here the Pakistan Pavilion, it says what happened in Pakistan will not stay in Pakistan. So if we can't even live our basic life because we are going underwater, it's very soon will same happen to you. And the problem is we as people who is vulnerable know how to adapt. You don't have this time or finding a way to adapt. So if you are not already taking action for yourself, you will not have the time to adapt, and you will face the most and the baddest of climate change. So that's why when we talk about growth or degrowth, we need to understand that people who are most vulnerable are also most resilient, and we need to learn from them how to grow.
Thank you very much. So talking about like inequalities and maybe ideas how to change our system, I want to give the part to Niklas for our second part where we face more about solutions.
Yes. I'm a little bit out of concept. I thought that we are still going to give the floor to
Time.
Okay, because of time reasons. Okay. We are on Solutions Day today, and we heard right now some critiques. Let us zoom in and see how we can really deliver up on the solutions we promised in this panel. And for this, I would like to give the floor back to you, Raisa, and ask you, like, how can we go beyond this concept of GDP? Like, we have heard already in 1972 in the Limits of Growth report that growth might be limited. We have right now the year 2022. How can we make this change possible, that we change our economy for post-growth?
Thank you for this question. It's not like I even asked you to ask this question to me because I wanted to reply to it. I think that I consume a lot of mass media. I watch Netflix whenever I can, and also a lot of movies, and I listen to a lot of songs all the time. And what I'm noticing is that mass media and mass cultural media has a lot of power in shaping our perceptions, the ways we live our lives, the things we like to eat, the things that we have pleasure with. So I understand that culture and pop culture and mass media is a huge way to make a change into this growth and degrowth ideas. What I've been noticing is that many of the storylines, even in a psychological sense, they always go about a hero or a person who finds true freedom and true liberation when they break all the barriers, when they break all the limitations. That's when you are your true free self. And usually that's the story with all this kind of like movies and Marvels and everything else, and The Good Place and House of the Dragons and everything I watch all the time. And maybe if we start creating our own stories, if we start creating our own narratives, that true liberation is actually found when we are limited, when we are within limitations of wishes, when we are limited in our needs, when we are limited in our wishes for consumption, when we want to have less things, then we are going to be truly free, and then we are going to be truly in abundance. Because we have more easily everything we want to, because we want less. Maybe this is already a great start to our problem of the economy. So I truly believe in storytelling, in arts, in going to mass media. So I'm very happy that Catherine also mentioned the media, kind of like broadcast media and all of this sort of stuff, because I think it's a great field for us to play with, to change these ideas, these perceptions, because after all, even our bodies and how we are kind of like people's economic beings is influenced and is shaped by culture. So I think that change through culture is a great way and is a great solution.
Thank you so much. Do you think, Jeffrey, that science and the IPCC can contribute to this narrative Raisa just explained? Or, what is the role, do you think, of science and the IPCC to pick up this concept of degrowth? And can science really contribute to this maybe political intervention?
What I would say is that you know that IPCC doesn't produce their own science, right? So IPCC tries to assess what the scientists all over the world are saying and what knowledge they are generating. So what is the scientific view globally that's represented in IPCC? So from that point of view, it was very clear this last report was that, we do not need as much of energy or material which we are using right now, because scientifically there are technologies available in the transport sector, in housing sector, in building sector, in industries, everywhere, all technologies are available. And also the different policies have also been tried out in different parts of the world, which can make the total demand for energy and material much less than what is we are using now. So what it simply means is that we are using the resources more wastefully now. So if we reduce the waste, then in the resource use, material use, and even food waste, the kind of waste we generate. So if we look into all these, then the technologically and policy wise also it is possible to deploy all of them and take away the burden on the supply side, which we are always looking for, that how much more coal we need, how much more fossil fuel we need to meet the demand. But we do not need that much of demand because we are using it wastefully. Say, for example, we are also saying that suppose if you are traveling in a city which is compact city, you do not need a car to go for a short distance. You can cycle, you can walk, but my city may not have a walking pathway. We may not have a bicycling lane. And then the infrastructure is not there, which gives me a choice to use or use the mobility means which I want. So basically what we are saying is that we need people to act, but it's not shifting the responsibility on our people, but also to provide right kind of infrastructure, right kind of technology, right kind of incentive so that people can make their right choices. So it is not about shifting the responsibility on the people, but also how you empower people. So it's from the policy making and decision makers and politically this needs to be managed. And from that point of view, I would say that citizens have an important role to play because citizens can demand these. So unless citizens demand this, sometimes it doesn't change the system. So this is very important, that how citizens demand, how investors make their choices, how a professional, say building designer, designs a building which is passive and needs less cooling and heating energy. So there is, all these are nothing rocket science. This all we know, all these, and happening in every part of the world. We just need to make this happen, the different small granular technologies, and which can be more inclusive, more employment generation, more job creation will also be possible without increasing the energy use or the material use or the emission use.
Perfect, thank you. I think that's really well links to what Timothy already said in the beginning to the concept of sufficiency. Timothy, how do you think we can reach this dream of a sufficient world with sufficiency? How can we get there? Can you tell us some concrete steps from your perspective, having thought about degrowth already for, already at least quite some years?
One concrete step would be to put GDP in a box and forget the key, throw away the key. We need to just We need to just start measuring things differently. So New Zealand in 2019, when they introduced, the well-being budgets, a dashboard of 65 indicators of social health and ecological resilience. I mean, that's a nice initiative. Now, the Well-being Government Alliance, Finland, Iceland, Wales, Scotland, New Zealand, like I would want to see more countries that are bouncing on like this growth-based vision of development, which is basically, imperialist new discourse of Western capitalism, is not fitting to the aspirations of many countries. And so we need to reject these indicators, and that start by just, crafting, or every country crafting its own dashboard and vision of prosperity. The second big obstacle to any change is inequality. So we need to drastically reduce inequality. I've been working at intra-national inequality, so not that much in between countries, so I won't talk about this. But if you look at inequalities in a country like France, you have like enormous wealth inequality, and even within a country that you would consider very privileged, where you think everyone is, we have very little poverty, and everyone is out of we should be expecting to see some kind of like us trying new stuff, being bold. We don't see this because it's blocked by the immaterial interest of the minority of the population. So we need to put hard caps on wealth and income. So that, I think, is going to be absolutely necessary. It is true at the level of a country like France. It is even truer at the levels of international inequality, even though, of course, like policy tools for doing this is just extremely more difficult. So that will be my second thing. And then I'm gonna say one thing that will seem a bit insignificant, but that's something I cannot stop thinking about. The other day I was watching a video about like how expensive it is to turn, these 1-minute advertisement for McDonald's or Coca-Cola, where you see just the perfect burger, the perfect glass, and these cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to make. So we spend hundreds and thousands of dollars to make 1 minute of advertisement for junk food that's going to incite people to consume food that should not be consuming. So here it is a true inefficiency in the sense of like to the basic service of feeding ourselves. We're going through absurd ways of satisfying that service. Industrial agriculture that destroy the land, just mass import of global resources from countries that we keep in a certain state in order to keep extracting cheap resources from them. Then we force these kind of imaginary of junk food desire into consumers to make them consume that stuff that make them sick. All of that for what? To create bullshit jobs in horrible working conditions and just to make mass profits for people that are already rich. So that's linking me to another thing. We need to go extremely hard against the profit motive. You being at the COP, I'm sure you must have noticed the importance and the power of lobbies and of corporations and of brands that come here to defend their interests, and especially the fossil fuels industry. This is something we know because, like the investments speak for itself. The money spent on advertisement and lobbying speak for itself. The number of lobbyists speak for itself. So, with people have been designing their perfect pathways to sufficiency, to the economy for the common good, to an ecological economy, to a post-growth economy, to a post-capitalist economy, to an eco-feminist economy, and whatever you want for decades. And, I've got plenty of books and concepts that are just wonderful. But all of that has been blocked by capitalist interests that just want to stay in the same situation because that's a situation where they can make a lot of money. So here that allows me to connect with my first point. If you cap the accumulation of wealth and income, you just take away that possibility. So I'll stop here.
Thank you so much. Then I directly will give the word to Fasana, because, we have this capitalist interest blocking change, but we have as well on the other side social movements like Fridays for Future, who can contribute to change. How can Fridays for Future and you contribute to a degrowth society? What kind of indicators, apart from GDP, would you envision to be going for on the street?
First of all, when we are talking about solutions and solutions day and all, solution is already here. As ma'am already said, solution is in the communities. And when we always talk about how we can do all these solutions and we talk about technology, we talk about technology transfer, but we don't talk about technology transfer from global south to global north, innovation transfer from global south to global north. But the people who are vulnerable are also resilient, and their resilience is the solution. And if we, the movement who is larger, who is growing every day, can't do the same, then we are also doing what the politicians are doing, just trying to let people know that yes, we are doing stuff. But that's why Fridays for Future and other global movements can also do that. First of all, understanding that the solution is in the community, and if I can't hold accountable myself, I can't hold accountable others. So the movement which Fridays for Future we are talking about started in global north. The activists also need to understand that the future-based approach may not work. So we need to show more solidarity to MAPA, which is most affected people and areas. We need to understand that the solution the indigenous people are talking about need more space rather than people who are well known. So we also need to understand that when we ask for climate justice, we ask for climate finance, we also need to understand what climate finance we are talking about, what climate justice means to everybody, to the marginalized. And when we talk about climate justice, also we need to understand that are we including people from your country who are more marginalized rather than some country which actually looks a good picture of a drone shot in a like flood situation. Rather than that, the people who is in your country, are they having enough equal rights as yours? This is, as a movement, we are trying to build, we are trying to grow, we are trying to like spread.
Thank you so much. Katrin, your last for this section about the political things of way of things. I know that you are as well an activist, but I'm right now really interested in how you think we can listen to the demands of Farzana, but as well of Timothy, who just said, well, we should lock this concept of GDP in a box and throw the key away. What can politics offer in order to achieve this vision?
Well, we could vote in favor for that in the parliament. For that we need a minority. And so to achieve things in politics, my experience is we of course need a very strong movement behind it. We need a civil society, we need people on the streets, we need people organizing conferences and doing a lot of education work. And so as well, for example, like the movement for climate justice, if there were no movement, there would be no possibilities of win. So for example, last week Germany decided to move out of the Energy Charter Treaty, a treaty which globally protects the investments of fossil fuels, and it was a huge step. And we had to work very hard for that. And we also had a huge struggle inside our own government for that. And yes, it was a big win, but it was not enough. And so to continue the struggle for climate justice, which is for me also a struggle for degrowth, we need a very strong movement, we need civil society, and also we need to be very inside the parliament and politicians, they need to be more brave, they need to be more honest, and also, well, to face fossil fuel industry, but also to shift the discussion. So, because right now, for some politicians, degrowth means to talk about less, and I would love to talk more about degrowth in a way of it means more. It means it means clean water. It means a livable future. It means more global justice. It means more social justice also in our regions. It means, for example, less or no Amazon and instead little shops where people get paid well. So this for me is also degrowth. And so we have to shift the discussion. For this we need civil society, and we need also to push the members of the parliaments, politicians, to go the way, to the path of degrowth and to be honest and brave. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So for now, I think we have some time left after this very interesting discussion for your questions, and for that maybe we can show the link to Slido again, because so also people online can contribute and show us some questions. So can we maybe show it on the screen? And yeah, and apart from that, are there already some questions you want to raise, which maybe came up in the, or maybe also some thoughts you want to address adding to this topic? I'm sure you can also ask Timothy. He's right here as well, so feel free. Yes?
Do we have a microphone? Do we have a microphone?
Microphone? Yes, perfect.
Yeah, I have to wait for him. Okay, thanks. My name is Sebastian. I work with the German environmental NGO, and our membership is very federal and basically older, I would say. And earlier, your colleague from Japan already told about the narrative of a post-war economic welfare story, and we have the same in Germany, I would say. So the Wirtschaftswunder, and what I was actually wanted to address to this panel is that when I talk to our members about sufficiency or degrowth, some of them feel a personal loss in this. And Katrin, you were saying you are thinking of more, not less. But how can you shift this perspective on a personal level? I mean, how can I make someone feel he gets more when he's not driving with his SUV to watch birds, for instance? So I really have no idea how to shift this, and I would really be interested if you have any perspectives on this. Also, I'm pretty sure that this is a very global north question, but I would also be very interested if you have a perspective from a global south on this, how to shift this narrative, because I myself have not a solution. Thanks a lot.
Sure.
Actually, I have an idea of this, and I think it's totally fair to feel the loss and to mourn it and to grieve. I think I think we are living through things that give us pleasure. And for example, I love airplanes. I'm a really fan of airplanes, and I watch videos of airplanes all day, and I think they're incredible. So I feel like I'm mourning the fact that I shouldn't be flying all the time, everywhere. And I think this is part of the process of degrowth, that communicating in a way that I absolutely agree that we should also focus on all the things that we are getting, but that it's also fair to grieve the things that we are losing, because we are humans and we like things and we have fun with things. And sometimes I'm also vegetarian, and sometimes some people, they want to stop eating meat, and I say it's totally fine that you like the flavor. And it's totally fine that you have all these emotions from your childhood, from when your mom cooked a dish with meat. And that it's absolutely key that in this process we also accept, and that we also feel sad, and that we also understand that feeling sad that we are losing our meat dishes, our flying vacations, the nice car that I'm driving to my job, it's okay to feel sad about it and to feel the loss. Also, always looking ahead of the things that we're going to get out of it. So I don't know if this is helpful or if answers in any way, but I think it's pretty much difficult to avoid losing things in this process.
So, yeah.
First of all, this is so true, and this is this should be the way. But also, why people need to feel losing things when the top 1% is not losing anything. So when we are shifting the narrative, it should be with those people from wealthy countries, knowing that they are losing a bit, but they are losing a way more because of this top 1% who is not losing anything, who is not losing with all those solution which is very personal. They can lose a very like small thing, but if they are making it together, a movement, a voice, then people who are holding their wealth can need to release those wealth, and then these people who are thinking of losing their like basic things don't need to lose those basic things. If those top 1% giving all those money to this climate adaptation fund, we don't need to like make taxpayers pay the tax for global south to get those money. That's the understanding we need to build.
So, thank you very much, Katrin. I think because we were addressed as well. Do you want to also add some very short answer to this question? Because I think we have some questions from the online audience afterwards.
Thank you for mentioning SUVs. Germans, they love their cars, and most of them, they don't have just one car, they have the second car, maybe a third car. I don't have a car, which is not normal for a member of the parliament, and sometimes it's getting very stressful when I have my bike, and with bus and with train I try to catch up all of my meetings, and sometimes it's very hard because the infrastructure, especially in the country area, is very. It's not that so polite to bicycles and to people who only want to take the train and the bus. So we need to establish another infrastructure, and we need to establish also in the cities a better infrastructure for bicycles, a safe bicycle streets. And in Berlin, in the capital, they are also trying to achieve more protected bike lines. It's an idea which came from Bogota. So before I went to the COP, I was in Cairo for 2 days, and we visited also a bicycle coffee there. And we drove with the bicycle through Cairo. And also like in Cairo there's a small but a really beautiful movement for bicycles. And so there is an alternative, which is also, yes, of course, it's less cars, but then there's also this more being able to drive to the city in a safe way with our bicycles, and this means more air quality, more health for us, and a truly friendly, climate-friendly city.
Thank you very much. So, yes, I think we have a question over there.
Yes, I will be taking over for the online audience. And someone is asking, is it even possible to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees without degrowth? And I'm looking to our guest from the IPCC.
Basically, IPCC report this time shows that if we can scale up our actions. So I'll give one more report which has come up very recently, which says that at the rate at which EVs are, electric vehicles are, scaling up, that needs to be 6 times more than what the rate at which what is happening now. So if we look into the fossil fuel power sector, then that need to, reduce every day 1 coal-fired plant. So these are the numbers which we are saying that we need huge scale up. And this is again supply side. But if you bring in with these the demand side solutions together, which are available everywhere, then actually it's not impossible yet. So we need scale up everywhere right now. And that scale up would mean a capacity in different countries to implement these. So I would say that still hope is there.
Okay.
Can we give the floor as well quickly to Timothy, maybe? Because we're right now not seeing that he is still online. Maybe we can switch back to...
Yes, that would be nice.
Timothy, are you still hearing us? And do you want to answer this question as well?
I don't know if you can still see me or hear me.
We can hear you at least, and we will see you in a second, I guess.
Okay.
But you can already start talking.
Yeah, my worry is the role that plays like negative emission technologies. That's my first worry about these 1.5 seemingly compatible scenarios that don't require much of degrowth, because somehow we assume that at some point in the future we'll manage to invent and scale in negative emission technologies that will allow us to remove part of the carbon. From what I've read from people working on this, for example, the British climate scientist Kevin Anderson, it seems to be like a risky bet to make compared to, and then I don't understand when we put this in the context of climate change being an existential threat, why not go for the safest, like precautionary principle? So meaning today, whatever cannot be greened in rich countries, if it's not going to put anyone in a state of poverty, that should be able to be reduced. That's the case for SUVs. There should be not a single SUVs in France right now, except for whatever the ambulance in the mountains or something like this. And advertising for SUVs should be considered illegal. So if we reduce the amount of cars we're using in a country like France, somehow these emissions, they are saved right now, fail-safe, certain. So I feel like in the few scenarios that have been developed after the latest IPCC report, they've not been included in the report, but that take into account degrowth scenarios for the rich countries, then we see faster, more fail-safe, more certain, faster and bigger trajectories of reduction. So I think if we compare the two, degrowth remains a more realistic and pragmatic. And here I'm only talking of degrowth as a strategy for climate mitigation. Of course, then we realize that green growth is not a strategy for social justice, for global justice, is not a strategy for well-being, in a no-growth environment. Just none of that. It's just. But even on comparing them just for the sake of climate mitigation effectiveness, I think degrowth wins pretty easily there. So even if only for this, it should be on the table when we have these negotiations.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. I think we have one more question over there.
Can you hear me? Oh, wow. I have another question for Timothy. As I don't know if I'm right about the numbers, but I think that the carbon footprint that every citizen has, for example in Germany, but also other European countries, is still rising slightly, but still rising over the last years. So where is the emission made? If we say that, also like scientists in Germany say that we have this decoupling of our growth and of our emissions. And so where is the emissions happening? And is it kind of just that we are exporting our emissions to other countries, for example, from the global south?
So there's a bit of that. So in France, for example, when you look at from the 90s to now, we've reduced domestic emissions by 27%. But during that increased imported emissions by 20%, okay? So that's mean that the carbon footprint that take into account like international trade has been only decreasing by 9%. So I think there is a bunch of countries where you see absolute reductions. My point is that they're very small. So they're very small and they only concern carbon. If you look like a material footprint, use of water, impact on biodiversity, this kind of stuff, it's a different story. But what we need to be aware of is, and I think this always should be repeated, just this decoupling never mention a target. So it says like it's a phenomenon, it's an endless horizon, just we're decoupling. It doesn't matter to be decoupling. When we're talking about climate mitigation, we're talking about targets, we're talking about net zero, and we're talking about net zero as fast as possible, you know. So the every year we go, and I mean you've looked at numbers of the global carbon budget that has been estimated, it shrinks and it gets more and more uncertainty about it. It gets smaller and smaller, that's what I meant. So everything the situation is becoming more and more difficult. So 10 years ago, decoupling was a ridiculous theory. Now it's a farce, it's a joke, because like it's becoming so impossible and more impossible. All the countries, again, historically most responsible for the problem and still today at the forefront of generating that problem on this kind of case of exceptionality.
So thank you very much. Regarding the time, I think we will come now to maybe a final round where we can I want to ask and invite all of you to give maybe a brief insight about your vision for the future and maybe things we still all have to working on. So maybe, Hassan, you want to start?
Okay.
And really, before you start, Reza, like we have like 7 minutes left, so around 2 sentences per person would be great.
Yes.
Thank you.
I just want to say that the economy is made out of humans and it's made out of people, and so is policy. And sometimes these things, they seem very abstract and hard to tackle, but it's very possible to do all these changes that we are talking about today. And I'm representing Youth for Nature. You can check us out on our website. Just go youthfornature.org and see all the things we're doing. And thank you for this opportunity today.
Thank you very much. So, yeah, I don't know, maybe Timothy, you want to go on?
I'll just say this, a generation of economists has developed a special expertise in the destruction of the living world. So now I find it a bit rich that our generation of activists and scholars are just mobilizing to try to get new ideas, and we're being shut down by people that tell us we don't understand how the economy works. And they still tell that to me, to sort of professional economists. We're still being given that discourse. So it's don't let yourself be told by people that you don't understand how the system works. And I think trust your gut. We need, now more than ever, we need utopias and we need to believe in them.
Thank you very much. So maybe Katrin, want to contribute, maybe also like your last thought to the panel?
I think what you said about climate finance was so true. And so we have to be more precise where we shift our finance to, also in our budgets, and also where we to put the pressure on so that, for example, the COP in Uganda don't get the finance from banks. So this is something very, very, very important and will decide our future as well.
Thank you very much. So, Yurashri, maybe?
Yeah, so I think what we really need is a narrative every day needs to be told.
Yes.
We are told every day that we need a big car, we need all the different things, materials in our life. So that narrative has to change. So I think working with those businesses and making them change the narrative is really, really the primary importance. And global south and global north is not the regional divide. It's everywhere. Everywhere we have the global north and everywhere we have the global south. So it's a social construct, not the geographic construct.
Yes. So finally we come to you, Farzana. Some last words.
So I think I have two messages. One is for everyone who's listening us is to follow this ambition in solidarity. So we need to show solidarity to the people who are most marginalized, and we need to understand what real solidarity means. And the second thing is to especially to the world leaders, including the German leaders, that don't say it, pay it. We don't need any more promises. We need actions, and we need to see where the money is coming and where the money is going.
Thank you very much. So with these very important messages and the end having been said, I want to say a big thank you to all of you for being here today and this evening and talking about solutions, not just problems. And also thank you to the online audience as well who was watching, and to Timothy who made it possible to be here today with us. After this event we organized some nice snacks, so maybe we can discuss further on with all of you and also with the audience about the topics we are talking about today. And yes, thank you all very much and have a nice evening.
Thank you as well from my side. I had a very interesting, insightful evening. I hope you too, and let's continue discussing a little bit with drink or some snacks. And yeah, thank you as well again for the team in Germany who has been organizing this, and the technicians and everyone who made this possible. But last but not least, our panelists. Thank you for being here. It was an honor, and yeah, have a good evening, everyone.
Yes.